I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked. On today's show, we'll be talking about space, cybersecurity, and you with Renee Wynn. She'll talk about why distant satellites in space do not mean that you are safe and protected from cyber threats. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madeline Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. About 5 years ago, I chaired a public event that invited an executive from AT&T and a state police officer to discuss computer security and our children. It was an information session. They spoke about how to assure your child's bedroom remained secure, even if they used technology in the room. As I had no young children at the time, I was more interested in my own security. And they didn't fail there either. To this day, I still create my own passwords, not to make it easy to remember them, but to make it easy to make them strong. I've never had a site tell me the password I generated was too weak. I've been grateful to them ever since. Today, the issues of cybersecurity have not become less. They have become even more important. So today, we will be talking about why it has become more important and what we as individuals can do about it. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Hundreds. Smith Island cakes have been a symbol of family, faith, and community. In 2009, the Smith Island Baking Company was created as the custodian of this treasure, shipping hundreds of thousands of cakes made from scratch, packed with care, and delivered to celebrations of all sizes and shapes, far and wide. Today, people just like you celebrate important occasions with a cake. When is your next birthday? Welcome back. I'm Madeline Blair, and we're listening to Unlocked. We're going to be talking today about cybersecurity and you. Now, just this past weekend, I was talking with someone who said, I don't use the cloud. I just won't use it. And I said, really? And I asked him why, and he talked about security, and he talked about energy and lots of things. I noticed, though, that he had an iPhone, and I said, how do you use your iPhone? And he began to tell me and enumerate all the things he did on his iPhone. I said, I hate to break the news to you, but you're on the cloud. We all face this. So today, the issues of cybersecurity have become more. And I want to introduce our guest. I met her recently at a conference, and I watched her manage a large audience, introducing some amazing speakers. She really honchoed it so well. I said, she's coming on my show. And then I discovered what her topic is, what her expertise is, and it's cybersecurity, along with a few other things. So I'm really happy to introduce to you Renee Wynn. She is the leader with over 30 years of experience in environmental policy, global information technology, and cybersecurity operations. Supply chain risk management, oh boy, that's a big one, and ESG, that is environmental, social, and corporate governance. She has led programs at the Environmental Protection Agency and served as the Chief Information Officer at NASA. Today, she serves on the board of the Virginia Tech Applied Research Corporation. And this is what I really love, actually the most about her. To continue, as she says, a lifetime of service. Renee serves on the board at the Women's Center a Virginia and Washington, D.C. based nonprofit operation dedicated to improving the community's mental health and well being through counseling, education, support, and advocacy. I need to bring her on. Renee, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you, Madeline. It is great to be here. And in fact, you and I met at the Women's Center conference, which you mentioned before, because that is one of my ways to give back, is having gotten in trouble for most of my life for speaking up too often or maybe during the wrong time frames. I was invited to serve as the MC for the event, figuring you might as well use your mouth for good.
I love it. And you did. It's often when I go to a conference that I feel like, oh, gee, if this MC would just get on the ball, but never with you. Well, I am so excited about this topic. And I suspect in our conversation, you'll find out why. Uh, the first one is I just want people to know how you got hooked on space.
Well, fascinating story. I usually begin to answer that question with the comment that, I was at the Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years. I saw firsthand how we were treating Mother Earth. And so I figured I needed to go to a place that had a way to another planet. And what did I think of? But NASA. And so off to NASA that I went. I went to get better at managing IT. It's a very, very complex organization, operates in space. Some of my past clients were in space, including cosmonauts. So I figured that was definitely going to be a challenge for me to get better at, frankly, at anything that could possibly happen, from leadership to managing IT and for overhauling NASA's cybersecurity posture.
Outstanding. Well, okay, so we know it's focused on space. So why do you think that everyone should understand more about space? I mean, come on, it's not part of our lives, our day-to-day lives, is it?
Let me turn it around your question to you, Madeline. How do you think your life, interacts with space every day?
Well, it actually has been active in my life even before Sputnik. Because when I was a kid, what I wanted to be was an astronaut. And people didn't even call them astronauts in those days. I don't even know what I called it. I just knew that I wanted to go out there and see this magnificent creation. I'm serious. So for me, creation, I call it, the universe, is always in my consciousness. Now, what else can I say?
Well, I think that's great, right? So if you're thinking about space and up at the stars and at the sun and the universe, frankly, that's awesome. And there are many, many people just like you that spend their days wondering, curious, and now with the access of so much material through the internet, you don't have to wonder anymore about space. In fact, this morning, my husband watched a video on the SpaceX launch last night, or the previous night, and it didn't go so well. And so he came in my office. He's like, "You're ready for your 30-second briefing on what happened technically." He's an engineer, so he explains it in a way as a non-engineer might understand things. And so it was great. And in fact, I even remember, didn't they have an issue with like this before? So it was a different set of issues. So the good news is everyone's learning. The bad news is it's a pretty expensive lesson when a rocket blows up, or you have to blow it up before it lands, just because that's the safer thing to do. So yes, lots of people spend their days thinking about space, what's happening in space and that. But our everyday lives are impacted by space. What do I mean by that? Well, whenever I drive anywhere, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, I flip open Google Maps. And in Google Maps, it tells me the traffic. And I can also say, what are my methods for getting there. And it gives me different routes, and some is through the traffic, and sometimes it's through tolls and that. So that's from the GPS, Global Positioning System. So the GPS is something that we use. That GPS system is also in your Uber Eats. It's in your dating apps. It's embedded in many, many applications, especially, the way you think of it is if it's embedded or not is, do I need to go from here to there, or does something need to go from here to there? And if it does, you can count on GPS being in the middle of that. I'm a big sports fan. I love to spend the fall watching football, whether it's college or professional level. That's brought to me by communication satellites. And those things beam up and beam down. And there I am happily in my house watching a game, either cheering or booing, depending upon how my team is doing. Or perhaps maybe I have a comment or two about the referee and that. So, and also, if we have a natural disaster or something happens, then a reporter will go to the scene and report on that accident. And again, they're using satellite communication. Having been in the Environmental Protection Agency and we did disaster response, one of the things people had in the early days was they carried a satellite phone. And let me tell you, I got to carry one for a while, and it is very similar to carrying a brick. And people call early cell phones bricks. No, a satellite phone was really a brick that you would have to do. So we've got our GPS systems, how we navigate. Ships, airplanes, all use navigation systems. So the goods and services that we use are also very much embedded in our use of space. We have our weather. I love to talk about the weather. Right now, we're in a patch of rain, and my plants, this spring plants, are loving every minute of it. Our grass is growing like crazy. But if I were in the military, I would actually want to understand the weather to a very, very fine point. And our weather satellites are flying and making many, many laps around the earth all the time and giving us information. And we're building those models. And weather is a strategic asset for military operations, for logistical operations, and such. So those are just a few examples of how space becomes part of our everyday life.
That's pretty impressive. It's sort of, in a way, it's totally embedded in our culture.
It is, and you don't really even know it. We also now have, if anybody's got the newer generation of an iPhone, they can make phone calls using satellite. We're seeing in operations in wartime or military operations, we're seeing the use of the internet, which is located in space now, which didn't even exist a few years ago.
Amazing.
Mhm.
As you're talking, all I could think of is the cybersecurity is becoming more and more important to me. But first, before that, I want us to move to an exciting place because we're going to do some pretty heavy stuff on this. You know, when I think of what I told you about being wanting to be an astronaut from the time I was little, I just thought it was so cool. Uh, I also was still think of the moon landing as just incredible what NASA did. And to think that they did that with much less compute power than we have even on our phones today. but but one of the stories for me that is so exciting is a project I worked on where we were trying to predict how solar panels would deploy when the satellite went into space because it has to get power from somewhere. And I had written the program for that. And when after it deployed, we had a video that we watched. And I can still feel the excitement when I watched that satellite do what I had programmed it to do. It's like, it did it, it did it. Those are exciting things. Now, you may not have done something like that, but I know you must have some great stories from your experience with NASA and space.
Thanks for sharing that story. It reminded me of something when especially when I talk to school children, people always ask me, well, how do I get in space? And people think of space as being astronaut driven. And yes, we've got astronauts and they're amazing folks and that, but there's a whole swath of positions and expertise that exists within NASA. We've got a lot of librarians, it turns out. Very interestingly, as you speak, and I think of the James Webb Space Telescope, and they have those sun shields that they're, roughly the size of a field. And you have to get that big giant space telescope into the tube of a rocket. And that tube looks really big to a human. But when you're launching a space telescope, believe me, every little centimeter matters. Well, those sun shields and what you were talking about is origami. Origami takes things and puts them and makes really cool things. You
Yeah,
could
yeah, yeah.
make a swan, you can do things with towels, you can do things with paper, you could do things with napkins. And that, well, origami also inspires how to approach putting your space asset, as I like to call it, into the tube to be part of payload in order to get up into space. And that folding in, the folding around, all of that. So the arts and design also are very prevalent in space operations as well, because some people think better spatially, and it's usually artists that can really do that spatial analysis, turning things around in different ways and that. And so as you were talking about the deployment, just reminds me of James Webb Space Telescope sending back amazing photos right now,
Yes.
and your work, and the fact that arts and designs have a huge place in space operations, which nobody ever thinks about.
I am thrilled to hear that because there is so, I'm thinking of young people, so they are so creative. And now there's potential here. So good. I coach
Yeah,
young people. So I'd like to know that there are possibilities.
absolutely possibilities. And thinking of possibilities, one of my favorite missions to talk about is called Osiris Rex. Osiris Rex was a satellite that went up. A robot came out of Osiris Rex and landed on an asteroid called Bennu. An asteroid travels at 17,000 miles an hour. So the satellite's moving, probably about 17,000 miles an hour. The asteroid's moving. A robot comes out and lands on it. And in that landing, the robot takes a sample. Now, when it took its sample, it had a little bit of trouble closing its sample door, but it succeeded. And then the sample came back to the United States. And I look at Osiris Rex and taking a sample on an asteroid. Now, why is that important? One is we can learn about the composition of an asteroid before it burns up in our atmosphere, because it's not going to burn up on its way through the atmosphere because it's going to be protected by the sample return vehicle that it is in. The United States is not the only one that did that. Several years before the United States, Japan also achieved the same thing. And both of those samples reside at the Johnson Space Center in the Moon Rock Library. Remember, I told you we had librarians? We have regular book librarians and we have Moon Rock librarians. But now I wonder if Johnson Space Center has to change the name to just Space Rock Library or something like that. I don't know. And this is my favorite just because of its technical capabilities is just so amazing. But the other part is people, we've read actually about sci-fi and space mining. Well, this journey, Osiris Rex, was in fact a pathfinder to space mining, right? We went up, we took a sample, and we brought it back.
Can we do it?
Mining,
Yeah.
we dig, we pull, we do other different things, and we pull samples, and then we figure out if we're going to mine again. And if we are going to mine again, how do we do that safely? So both the United States and Japan have come up with ways to do space mining. Now, granted, it's still really, really expensive to do it, but we have proved technically that we can do it. And as we like to say at NASA, we turn science fiction into fact every day.
Oh, it's a great story. Well, I'm glad we told all these great stories. Now let's talk about this issue of of cybersecurity. What are the concerns with the use of space?
So, just because something is a few hundred miles off the face of the earth, it doesn't mean that it is safe from cybersecurity. In fact, it's not even safe from being caught and being futzed with for nefarious reasons either, which is always surprised. People are generally surprised by that. And I can tell a little bit about that in a second. But on the cybersecurity side, our flying assets, as I call them, our satellites, they are connected to Earth regularly. We uplink and we downlink information. A lot of times that information is really data that might be collected about the atmosphere or collected because it's scanned the Earth in some reason, and that data goes up and it comes down. And in that up and down, if it's not encrypted, it can actually be easily siphoned off or taken by nefarious actors, or maybe not nefarious actors, because cybersecurity is fun, fame, and fortune. So they could do it for fun because they just want to be able to say they did it, do it for fame, and they go out on the dark web and say, hey, look what I did, and pay me and I will do some more for you, assuming the data going up and down has got a high value to the black market. And then the fortune part is, so I sell the data that I get on the black market, like our social security numbers and our medical records and things like that. And again, so it's fame, fun, and fortune, or a combination of all three, two, whatever it is. But that's the driver generally for cybersecurity. And space isn't immune. We have the uplinks and downlinks. We have insider threat. So if I'm in mission control and I'm sitting at the computer trying to do the commands or look at the data, I could look both ways and put something into the computer and make bad things happen to that satellite. We also have the ability in space to do cyber threats. That's a little more expensive. A little more talent is necessary to do that. But as a satellite or flying asset, as I call it in space, is not immune to a cyber attack just because it's a few hundred miles from Earth. The composition of attack is roughly the same. The cost of doing an attack is a little bit higher.
Well, you just took the last little leg of comfort out from under me.
No. You're okay. You're okay. No. We should live comfortably. We should just be vigilant, right?
Ah, well,
Yeah.
so who is going to be vigilant and how do we be vigilant?
Right. So let's talk about kind of the latest thing that's happening. And I'm, lived in the cyber world for years. And I get these texts all the time. I don't know, Madeline, have you gotten a text message that you're going, who is this from? And what is this about? It's just enough real to make you look at it,
Yeah.
but it also means it's just enough not real to get you to click on it.
Oh, there is no question. I probably get at least one a day, sometimes multiples a day. And you're right. They look very real because they will imitate PayPal or they'll imitate um, Maryland's Easy Pass. And it goes on and on. But now, whenever I see it and I think, why are they talking to me about that? I go, this is a heck. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what they want you to do is click on that link. And you click on that link, it's what I call the ignosecond. An ignosecond is best explained by it's the minute you close your door and you hear that lock and you look in there and the key or the key fob is on the inside. In that ignosecond, you're like, oh dear, I now have another challenge in my day. But that's what those links are intended to do. They social engineer them to look like something you would possibly get. You get the Maryland ones, I get the Virginia ones. I was recently in France for a wedding. I got one that said, you owe a toll for a French road. Well, I was thinking back and I'm going, my husband drove and we never went through a toll. Why is this asking for something? But I had to think and draw back and I went, all right, delete and report. So a lot of the phones allow you to delete and report, and that's a really good thing to do. So what happens, this is the most common cyber threat, and that's a phishing attack. It's familiar enough to you, the user, that you pause and you go, oh yeah, that's probably something that makes sense. I have a package downstairs. Now, of course, I get that. I'm in a home. And of course, my package is going to be downstairs because I don't deliver it to the second floor of my house. I've not seen any drones or anything like that. But if you're working in an office and you get, oh, your package is in the, in the lobby, it makes sense to you, but
Yes.
it really isn't that. And they're really, really good at studying you and things that are adjacent to you, and then making that email or that text message come to you and make it look like it's absolutely real. And that is the most common action. And it is still the highest success rate for the bad guys, because it doesn't matter how sophisticated AI gets or anything like that. Humans clicking on a link is the biggest problem to your network.
Well, darn. I click on the links all the time because I
Well,
have,
there are some that are okay to use.
right. What comes to my mind is how do they learn all the things that we're doing?
Yeah. So your computers. I'll tell you a story. I was looking for a red dress. I was like, "Oh, I think I would like to red dress for work." There are just days where I just need a
Yeah.
positive energy, besides pink, which I generally wear. And so I went shopping for a red dress in lots of little different places. And then I'm just on getting ready to go in the internet browser to go do something else. And these red dresses start popping up. Well, those cookies, everything that you do on the internet is getting to be known about you. And the folks that are experts in cybersecurity, the nefarious ones, go around kind of getting this information. They get your contacts, and so then they form these profiles for you, so to speak. And I'm just speaking in a way that hopefully everyone understands. It forms this profile, so it comes up with the highest probability of something to put in front of you that you would go, I think that's real.
Mhm.
But you don't have to fret about that, because yes, they're going to be trying to make it look real. But here's some things that you can do. One of the things that you could do is, if you mouse over the email address, it's usually a pretty funky email address. Like it doesn't say Amazon, it'll say something slightly different than Amazon on it. And you'll know, okay, that is definitely not it. Secondly, really ask yourself, one, are you really going to win an Apple Watch or the latest iPhone because somebody picked you from an email? Unlikely. Unlikely. So don't bother with it. If it comes, a lot of times they'll get into somebody's email system and use their address book and put out a bunch of emails. Well, then if you're concerned that maybe it came from your best friend, text your best friend or email them separately and say, did you send me an email asking me to click on a link for us to go to a show together? And they might say, I'd love to go to a show with you, but no, I didn't send you the email. So always be suspicious when you get an email that you aren't expecting. Look at the email address, look at spelling. A lot of times there's one misspelling in the whole thing, and you can find it. Receive is a commonly misspelled word. I commonly misspell it, and I'm not a hacker, but that I before E thing gets me sometimes. But and they clearly sometimes they don't use spell check or an English spell checker when they write these emails. So these are sort of four things that you
Hmm.
can do. Check with who the sender is, check the email address. If it looks suspicious, be suspicious. If there's a misspelling somewhere in it, and if you weren't expecting it, don't assume anything.
Hmm. Okay. I think these are absolutely terrific things for people to do because they're reasonable.
Hmm?
Reasonable. It just requires attention.
Yes.
Um, how about if you are running a company?
Hmm.
Ha- you, I'm sure, have thought about this. Uh,
Yes.
a lot of my audience are managers who are running teams and companies. Talk to them about what they can do.
Yeah. So cybersecurity is a business risk. Remember the fame, fun, and fortune.
Right.
If someone's doing it for fame, they're going to also come back to you for fortune. And use what's generally called ransomware. Get in and take over and hold captive a system. Another thing, so no business is immune from this. In fact, I talked to a woman who was a makeup artist and they got hit with ransomware. And it was a 12-person company. And I was about to go on stage for a speech about cybersecurity as a risk, as a business risk. And she said, "You are so right." And then we talked afterwards on more things that she could do just to secure her business. And it's a business of 12. You don't have millions of dollars to spend on this one. So, what you can do is there are some low cost options to invest in cybersecurity. I use on my phone Microsoft Defender because I get that as part of my package of my Office 365 license.
Mhm.
I also purchased McAfee to do some. I'm like belts and suspenders, and I'd have duct tape on with cybersecurity as well. So these are simple things that you can do, but you really, really must do them. There are also companies that help small businesses in particular that are reasonably priced. In that small company should expect to be using tools that are secured. The small company should ask their businesses to do an audit of cybersecurity, which is what tools do you use for your business? Some use many, some use just a few. Point of sale where you go put your card in to buy. It used to be a hugely attacked vector. It is still a hugely attacked vector. It's just cybersecurity things have been implemented to protect the payment systems between you and your bank or you and your customers and all that. So it's usually embedded in the system that you buy. So be alert. Make sure when you're buying a system, you're buying cybersecurity. And if you're not buying cybersecurity, buy an expert in it, especially one who works with small businesses because they're willing to give their time and their expertise for a reasonable amount of money. And this is true as you go up the scale of business size, large global operations, which is what I did. So for us, not only we had to answer questions about our network, and this is a basic cybersecurity business of any size. If you're running your own network, and at NASA we ran our own network, it was a global operations, including in Russia. So we operate and still operate in Moscow, and we have a network that is connected to the International Space Station, where humans live all the time, and they have for more than 25 years. We kind of always forget that our astronauts are up there and cosmonauts are up there working on amazing science every single day. And so, what you want to do are two basic questions: who and what are on my network? And you can do this no matter where you sit. And understanding and driving your cybersecurity posture to protect against who and what is on your network. One of the who's is our identity and passwords. And in the United States federal government, we used our badges. I couldn't remember what one is. I haven't used one in a while, but our badges, and we connected our badge, had a little chip in it and our identity. And so it would go into the computer. So it's kind of like the Cinderella slipper, right? You take that little slipper and you put that into your computer and you see if the size fits by typing in just a couple of numbers. And by having that badge and those numbers, you have the perfect fit for Cinderella. And that's two-factor authentication. And most businesses really should be thinking about doing that. Lots of different ways that you can do it. Your banks use it all the time, right? You're like, oh, I'm logging in and it says, I'm sending you a code. So again, you've got the phone and you've entered into that app, and now you get that extra little thing to put on there, and you've got multi-factor. Those are two basic things. The who and what is on your network, plus who, and the identity piece is also related to how you get on the network. You can answer those questions. You've knocked down probably about 50 to 75% of the cybersecurity risks that you have. And then you train. You teach people not to accept those links and do those ignoseconds. And we finally had the chance, an amazing team at NASA. We turned it into a game, and and I also had the authority to lock you out. So if you didn't take your training, sorry, Madeline, you didn't. You had a month to do it. You didn't do it. We locked you out, and you weren't on leave for some reason for a long period of time. And if you were, we would still lock you out and you'd have to come report and take it in paper format. But we gamified
Are
it.
you
And then
serious about this? Were
yes,
you?
exactly. And when we gamified it, people would see me in the hallways. No matter what center I was in, they're going, Renee, I just earned 4 blue ribbons from our training. And when we did that, people had so much fun. They're like, yeah. And we, of course, used a space theme because we are NASA when we did ours and that one. So the other part is if you could train on phishing, so you're probably getting the next 5 to 10% after that. So you're probably moving the needle on your cyber protection through, the questions and the authentication as well as the training. You're moving the needle way up the stack for cybersecurity risk to your business, which is a good thing, addressing or mitigating that
Yes,
risk.
yes. This reminds me of when I was teaching at Columbia. You had to learn so many things and had to go, and it had to do with security. It always
Yeah.
came back to security.
Wow, that is great.
Okay.
I would have probably struggled in what we call the .edu environment because one, especially at Columbia, actually, there's a astronaut who teaches at Columbia now, and they're so smart and they're so curious, these students, and then they just get on that keyboard and they do things, and you're like, oh, I wish you wouldn't do that. I mean, I wish you would because that's great for your future, but I wish you wouldn't because you're hurting things here.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the students that they were worried about. They were
They should have
much
been,
more
believe
worried about
me.
the nefarious ones in the world. Yeah. By the way, I really never thought about it as fun, fame, and fortune. That really helps me understand why people do this. Really does. I know that sounds probably obvious, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that was part of, well, you were in education, right? E- Education with stories and making it interesting and attaching it
Hmm.
to the people you're talking to makes the education come to life. And so
Absolutely.
at NASA, they're so smart at NASA, believe me, they really are. And I just I had to get better at communicating, a lot better at communicating. And I've even since I left NASA, I've gotten better and better at communicating because I talk to all ages, different uh, disciplines that people work in, and talk about the importance of cybersecurity risk and having that as part of your enterprise, your business risk,
Hmm.
and making sure that you're managing your reputation and your finance,
Right.
let alone making sure that you're allowing people to work easily. Yeah.
As you're talking, it occurs to me you said who and what. Now I'm thinking about what are in people's homes that could jeopardize this. I mean, everything from the the thermostat to the the, the camera on the front door, the Alexa, or talk about that. And is that something that people should be concerned about with regard to security?
Madeline, you're brilliant. The answer is absolutely. And in fact, one of the hardest elements in cybersecurity is what's called the Internet of Things. Everything that you just mentioned is under that category of Internet of Things. Just quickly for folks, there's sort of 3 categories. Some professionals don't mind this. Some professionals get really out of whack with what I'm going to give you as the classifications. But I like these because I think people understand them the most. One is IT, information technology. It's your mobile devices, it's your computers. Okay, I got that. Then you have your operational technology. That's your HVAC systems. And at NASA, we had cryogenics, which were, highly sophisticated cryogenics. Our launch facilities had lots of sensors and everything. That's more Internet of Things, but some of those launch sensors belonged in the operational technology, the fueling systems and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So technology you do to operate the business besides the laptops and the mobile phones. The next piece is your Internet of Things and running a gas line. Gas lines have tons of Internet of Things. These are sensors that say, oh, I'm sensing a gas leak, and a gas can be
Ah,
vapor or it could be liquid.
yeah.
Yeah. And your Alexa, and she's always listening, and my Apple Watch, and I wear an Aura ring. These are Internet of Things. They, up until recently, haven't been designed to allow you to put on it something to protect it. A lot of times you can, like I talked about McAfee and Microsoft Defender, those things go onto the computer, onto the mobile phone in order to help protect the device itself. Well, there's not much space on this ring to put anything else other than the technology that it has on it. But it can be designed, it's called secure by design, design it with security in mind. And that's a newer, it's not the latest thing, but it's a newer way to deal with Internet of Things. But in the meantime, the United States, all across the globe, is filled with Internet of Things that struggle to be protected. And you have to consciously decide that you are going to protect it. So know what you have, and then where is it, and then figure out how to protect it based on the latest technology. And there's a number of companies and there are a number of strategies that you can implement to protect your Internet of Things as best as you can. Some of the Internet of Things, like on sensors for fuel lines and that, much older technology. The operating systems that they touch are much, much older. And so it's much, much harder to address. So perhaps on a repair or a refresh, this is when you start putting in the newer technology to protect yourself.
Wow. I have to admit, I banned Alexa out of the house.
You were smart to do
I said,
that.
I will never have one of those in the house. I don't need that kind of interface. I'm happy to talk to my phone. I'm happy to talk to my computer. I'm happy to type something in the computer to ask a question. I don't need that kind of assistance. And it actually makes me feel more comfortable and more safer, just safer. So
Yeah.
it's, but
Madeline, what I hear is this is a risk conversation, right? We all have personal risk issues. I'll call it that, or
yes,
swim lanes, right? You might be like, let's go jump out of an airplane. And others will say, oh my God, that's a little risky for me.
yeah,
I've jumped out of an airplane. It's really fun. And yeah, one does wonder why you leave a perfectly good airplane to land on your feet in a cornfield, but it was a cool experience. Like yourself, you'll say, I'm not going to have an Alexa. If you've got an Apple phone, you have Siri unless you've turned it off.
yeah,
In that, right? And so you're making a risk decision based on your lifestyle and what you're willing to do.
yeah,
Um, Riding a bike with or without a helmet, that's a risk based decision,
yeah.
right? Exercise, no exercise. Eat healthy, don't eat healthy. I love birthday cake. Should I eat it every day? I would love to, but probably not a good idea from a health risk perspective. So our lives are have this spectrum of risk decisions, but we don't always think of it that way. We just think of it as preferences. But in this way, Madeline, you just said your preference is not to take on the risk of having Alexa in your home.
Hmm. Now, mind you, I sit here with 9 computers.
Oh my.
Oh yeah, we have. Well, it's people do work here, so and there are all kinds of routers, and,
Mhm.
and the list goes on and on. But I just decided I was not going to deal with that. But you're
Yeah.
right. Siri is there, and I can talk to Siri, and do. It's one of my.
I'm listening.
Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't have timed that one better if I tried.
Oh, what's really funny is when I'm talking to my phone and my husband's computer. Says,
I
yeah,
know. I know. Isn't it? It's embedded in this,
yeah,
and there's some benefits to it. But like everything in life, there's a good side and a dark side. We all learned this from Star Wars if you watched it, right?
yeah,
There's no individual is defined by a single bad act. And no thing that we use in life is 100% perfect rainbows and unicorns, right? Because using a computer too long hurts the eyes, too much blue light when you want to go to sleep. But using a computer Madeline, you do these shows, you produce these amazing shows, you write books. It creates this amazing content for so many of your customers, your clients, your audience. In that case, computers are really beneficial thing.
No
I,
question. I could not live without them. I mean,
I,
quite literally.
and well, you can't read my writing anymore, so you're asking me to probably type everything up from here on out.
Well, this has been just fascinating. I think in the end, what I'm hearing from this conversation is it is pointless to get overwrought about it. Do what you can do and know that the technology is vulnerable. We are vulnerable, and you just have to learn to do what you can do and actually do it instead of talking about
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
I think
You,
that's
you, I think you're absolutely right. And the first line of defense of anything is education. And in this day and age, with all the videos at your fingertips, if you have a concern, you can go out and do that. We always say this is the age of you don't need to wonder anymore.
that's true. That's true. Even what I love, what I love is when you're sitting at the table. Now, mind you, there are no phones out at the table. You're here, you're talking, and somebody asks that question. And in fact, this happened one time. I had a dinner party, and there must have been 8 people around the table because I never had dinner parties bigger than that. I used to do 12, but that was too much work. Anyway, and somebody said, in fact, somebody asked me what I wanted to be when I was little, and I said an astronaut. I said, but the word didn't exist when I was little. So the conversation continued on, and someone at the other end whips up her phone and says, actually, that word did exist, but not in common usage until, and she named the date when it became. And I thought, yeah, that's a great use.
Right.
We don't have to wonder.
You don't. The age of what I wonder, I mean, unless we just haven't discovered it yet.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
In that case, but most of the questions asked around the dinner table, hold on, let me look that up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, yep. Wasn't Benjamin Franklin didn't bother remembering things that he could look up? Well, I am well in that state right now.
Listen, I think everyone needs to be because there is so much that we now have accumulated
Right.
just in terms of knowledge. Well,
Exactly.
speaking of knowledge, we are almost out of time, but I did want to give you the opportunity to say some final words if you would like to our audience.
I like to say to folks that space is for everyone,
Mm.
whether you want to work in it or not. You can follow, like, NASA has two TV channels. Yes, I got to secure TV, um, and several apps that you can download. You can follow them on social media. You can follow SpaceX. You can follow Blue Origin. You can follow the European Space Agency or the French Space Agency or whatever you want to do. Space is for everyone. And I want to emphasize, because a job in space is not just an astronaut, it's an engineer, it's a software manager, it's an IT specialist, it's a cybersecurity specialist, it's a moonrock librarian, it's a regular librarian that goes into this one. And I say this with all my heart to let your viewers know. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in economics, and I went on to be the CIO of NASA, a job that didn't exist when I graduated from college. So if you're interested in space, you can do it professionally or you can do it for fun. But just keep reaching for the stars because you'll never know what you will learn and who you will meet.
Outstanding. I don't think anybody has given such admonition to everyone on the audience. Thank you so much, Renee. I
Oh,
really appreciate your time.
thank you so much.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. Cybersecurity can strike fear in us. We can't do everything to correct the malicious use of technology, but we can learn to be resilient to the threat. I immediately thought of Joan Rosenberg's little book called Ease Your Anxiety. let's see, get it in the right, there it is. There it is. Ease your anxiety. And I also really appreciated that our guest today, Renee, said education was a part of this. Dr. Joan is a psychologist. So she writes about how we can gain confidence, emotional strength, and inner peace. And by the way, these are all characteristics of highly resilient people. One of the chapters is called Anxiety and Decisions. Now, that says we should choose growth over fear, anxiety, or worry. Now, you know, resilience begins with the decision that you're going to move on when bad things happen or there's a threat. Strengthening your ability to make the decision is at the crux. As humans, we shrink from things that frighten us and reach out to things that make us feel safe and comfortable. So what do you do when we must live with things that frighten us, yet they're essential to our lives? I read further in the chapter and kept thinking about the word growth. If we're to choose growth over fear, anxiety, or worry, then how do we grow? Well, it turns out that if you're growing, you're not shrinking by definition. And if you're growing, you're not succumbing to the fear or the anxiety either. But what is this thing called growth? And then I read, if you don't have to expend physical or emotional energy on protecting yourself, then you can gravitate to experiences that involve growth, namely connecting with others. I had to read further. When you feel safe, you are more likely to explore, investigate, exhibit curiosity and interest, search for more, and pursue experiences that elicit a sense of purpose and meaning. I had the answer. If cybersecurity makes you feel anxious or fearful, then you have to learn more about it. You have to learn about it yourself and connect with others to learn. Learning was the answer. It doesn't change the situation, but it offers a way to keep your fear in check. You can't be moving toward both growth and fear at the same time. Likewise, learning and worry of the unknown are two opposite directions. At this point, I felt a real sense of satisfaction that I had brought greater understanding to you, my amazing audience, about something that can be fearful just by learning about it. So learn more, talk about it with others. It may not change the situation, but when you understand it better, you actually feel more in control of yourself. Ease Your Anxiety by Dr. Joan Rosenberg. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you have enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. I know I have. Please send me an email if you think of a topic that you'd really like to have me covered. I have a vast network. So just send me it and say, let's talk about this, Madeline. It's something that's important to me. Send me an email, madeline@madelineblair.com. And that's spelled Madelyn. Slightly unusual spelling of Madeline. And by all means, come to my website and sign up for the newsletter. It's easy to do, and I send only one email a week, and I never share my lists. Of course, if you're on YouTube, I want you to click that like button. And, and of course, I want you to subscribe. Yes, I know it's good for me, but it's also good for other people because it helps them find this kind of quality information. I'm Madeline Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock the resilient leader in you.